but yeah, I mean, that's a quick overview. I mean, we can go from there. Let's see, any questions? When's launch? How will launch be? So this maybe is part of the discussion we want to have with you guys. Is we are also like very much like Olympus. We want to target a fair launch. The entirety of what we're trying to build here is to be fair, distributed, and make sure that we have something that is super useful for the community, but also like it's something where if we win, like we collectively win. So it's something that we're really keen on making sure that that's done right. So we're learning a lot from the Olympus launch and how that went, basically making sure that we're trying to mirror that in many ways, and also have improve on a couple pitfalls that they expressed, and they said, oh, we wish we did something different here and there. So it's not that it's not happening, it's just we want to get it right and make sure that it's super correct. And so gauging interest was the first thing we did, which is, as we saw over a week, we've got 700 people in the Discord, which is more than any of us imagined, and we're super stoked that you guys are all here. But yeah, I mean, that's soon. TM is always the answer. We'll get there. We're trying to nail down dates this weekend, and we'll have something that we can kind of discuss publicly as well. So I guess, do you guys have any further questions? Because I know there's a lot of topics covered in the last the GME style potential that someone suggested, RI was really good. I really think that that's a very good way of approaching how to think about what we're trying to achieve. But if anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to hear them. I think we all want to answer as much as we can. And if you have any questions about our docs or anything, like stuff that you've been reading, like what do you think of it? Is it been written correctly? Is there anything that's confusing? Those types of things.
I think I just saw Monk, you trying to raise your hand. Maybe do it again if you want to. I don't know why you're not on stage.
There we go. Monk, do you hear us?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, good. Yeah, you guys are dope. Archimedes is putting out shit. And one thing I just wanted to address is ecosystem and all that. Was curious kind of what your take was on the whole thing, and how can we be the number one stable, algo stable, whatever, over on Polygon? How can we do that?
So, I mean, we're not exactly trying to be the stable, like in the traditional, packed sense of what stable means. But I'm sure you're aware of that coming from probably the Olympus community. So it's really much about creating long-term price stability around a uncorrelated asset, which is carbon, right? As an asset class in DeFi, and also as a building block for others to build upon. I mean, Polygon was essentially a pretty easy choice for us because launching this on layer 1 Ethereum it's not really an option for us, because as long as Ethereum runs in proof of work, it doesn't really work with our values in terms of like fighting for climate and at the same time work blockchain. So, and then looking at like side chains that are very close to the Ethereum ecosystem, Polygon just has been outperforming all the others, and also we as a team have very close ties with the guys there. So I don't know if Archimedes, you want to say a little bit more about that, because yeah, you're the one bringing who brought Polygon to the team and originally, so I think we have an opinion.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, we're a very opinionated set of folk on a lot of things, and Polygon being the implementation layer, yeah, it's great. Like from a green perspective, like pushing into a proof of stake system for now. I mean, obviously the checkpoints aren't green, so like there's nuance there, of course. But what it really is it's about like basically building that community. Like the layer 2 Polygon ecosystem is exploding, and it's something we want to be a part of. And like I said, like they are, like we know them very, very well, and they're very interested in Klima DAO. So we're trying to push for a lot of their support. I mean, they've been huge supporters of this kind of stuff for a while, and falls very in line with what they're doing. That being said, I mean, it doesn't preclude the possibility of existing on layer 1. It's just layer 2 offers us like a lot of the infrastructure that we're bringing to this as well that's been deployed or built has already built on layer 2, especially with the carbon stuff. And so we have to make sure that we're on the same network essentially. So that's the big reason for it. And to become like the biggest like sync of it is going to be interesting. I think the biggest algo stable on Polygon will be, I don't want to say easy, but there isn't too many of them, and I think we might be among the first of people trying to deploy something like this there. So yeah, that's what we're trying to get to. I mean, we will want to look like a big treasury there, and it's really interesting. Polygon is a good choice also for a number of other reasons. Like the actual infrastructure that's coming there is more, and every day like there's more and more deployments of stuff that's getting there. Like a week and a half ago it was Gnosis multi-sigs. Now Infura has like full nodes there deployed, so you have like top enterprise grade infrastructure getting deployed on Polygon, and it's really telling because those same organizations aren't doing that anywhere else. They're not doing it on XDAI. They're not doing it on Binance Smart Chain. They're all doing it on Polygon. So like I think Infura's launching nodes a week ago or a week and a half ago was like the biggest signal to the entire community saying like, yeah, we're following the developers and this is where it's happening. So it's for us, it's making sure that we have A, long-term stability, but also B, like we're choosing an ecosystem that is truly growing, and we want to be a part of it too. So
no doubt,
for
dude.
sure.
No doubt. I'm like a big Polygon guy. I got over there maybe like 6 weeks ago. Started making money, farming, the incentive rewards and all that type of stuff. Love it, So I see the confluence of all the things happening over there with Curve and Aave, and I know Pickle is gonna launch over there soon. Yeah, for a DeFi player, retail player, it's a no-brainer. You got no fees, and you got a great market over there. So I love anything that's rolling out over there, but it does have a reputation of some rugs, So I know you guys are doing it, creatively and diligently to be good, but I'm all for that, Like I think L2s and specifically Polygon's very solid right now. So I love it, dude. I love what you guys are doing. I'm all in.
Hey, we have another member of 0xj. Yeah, here, Monk. I'm gonna move you back to the audience. If that's
Yeah,
cool.
move me out.
Yo, shout out to all the Omis.
Yeah.
My question was, so I understand we're trying to pretty much back our treasury by these carbon credits and have this kind of liquidity black hole for these carbon credits. So what is the current market for this? Like how you said, these big players are into carbon credits mostly. Like what is the current market cap of these credits? Like I'm not exactly sure how to phrase that.
Yeah. So like, what's the market size of carbon? It's a really good question. So
Yeah.
it's Yeah. So there's a lot to be. So there's two distinctions we got to make right at the gate. There's two distinct markets. One is called compliance markets, and one is called voluntary markets. Compliance markets are basically what all countries around the world in the Paris Accord agreed to reduce their emissions. They can basically trade these emissions in various ways. It's highly regulated, deals with the UN, that kind of stuff. Everybody else that's, Microsoft, Google, Bing, whatever, that you say that they're going carbon neutral, they play in what's called voluntary markets. And voluntary markets is where you buy tons voluntarily to retire them and then make some sort of green claim with it. And this is where we're starting. So compliance markets are a much bigger beast. They're much bigger in terms of size, but voluntary markets do about 500 million tons a year. US dollars in a year. The entire carbon market, if you include carbon compliance markets, is estimated as I think as of a figure 3 years ago, which is totally different now, but is about 18 or 13 trillion dollar market is how big it is. Oh, it continues to grow every year. They're expecting voluntary market to grow almost double in 5 years. So they're expecting, and this has only been accelerated through COVID. Like all of our advisors and team members have basically seen the same thing across carbon markets. Basically, all the carbon tons are getting scooped up by various companies. There is definitely starting to become a shortage, and it's becoming more and more difficult to get your hands on stuff that is coming out on the right time. So it is a huge market. And it does trade significant volume. On chain, there's almost nothing though. There's very little. There are projects here and there who have worked on certain things, but in serious, if we're talking serious size, there still isn't anything. Someone asked in the contribute, what do you think of, or not contribute, I think some questions. Oh, energy web chain. Energy web chain is interesting for a number of reasons, but it's not exactly the place you want to be in terms of ecosystem, just because of network effects. Polygon makes a lot of sense because it carries with it the entire Ethereum ecosystem. So that's why you don't want to leave, right? Binance Smart Chain, you gotta have a really good tie to Binance to actually be there. XDAI was a contender with Polygon, I'd say back in January, but then they obviously got completely destroyed. It's the whole Blu-ray versus HD video thing that we've seen a zillion times. So XDAI is cool and they have their use cases, but it's very clear that Polygon has become the winner. And so aligning yourself with that is kind of the argument I would say against energy web chain. That being said, that they change their tune and people do adopt it in droves, it could be interesting. I haven't seen that yet, but yeah. So to answer your question in a really short roundabout way, it's about $500 million a year in traded volume, and then it's 13 trillion as a market cap in total with compliance markets. The other half of that is it's very hard to know the size of it because the opacity and there's almost no transparency in terms of a lot of these trades. There's a lot of OTC trading that happens as well. People purchase tons directly from producers and they do all sorts of really backdoor deals to get stuff, and then they sell them on the open market. So it's hard to actually gauge truly what the value is. And most research basically suggests that it's much bigger than the figures we know. It's still an emerging market and an emerging asset class.
Yeah, definitely appreciate that answer because my knowledge of this was nowhere near to even thinking it was close to 500 million, and to think that it could even go beyond that to past 13 trillion to what you essentially explained is limitless. You guys are solving a pretty big problem, and I'm definitely down to be here for the long term. So thank you for having me on for that question.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I just want to add, essentially, right, as a civilization, we don't really have another choice, in my opinion, to build out a functioning carbon market and drive the price of carbon to a level where it becomes more. Where the logical step is to not cut down the forest, right? Because your forest is worth more than actually cutting it down, which today is not the case, right? Today, a forest is, more useful as a piece of agricultural land where you can grow whatever, palm oil or whatever. This is, it has to change. And in my opinion, if you believe in civilization, if you're long on civilization, we should all be long on carbon. That's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I'm definitely long civilization, so I'm gonna be long you guys for sure.
Cheers. Bye, you guys.
Thank you.
Hey, yo, what's up? I'm glad to be here. I had a question. I read the blog post, and actually, Judo Kick had told me about this idea like last month, and I was really, really interested. So I'm happy you guys launched. It's really awesome. I was wondering about the details of like how there wasn't really much detail in the blog post, and you guys are talking about like a stable asset or a algo stable. What is exactly the plan for a Klima DAO and like the token, and how are you guys pricing the carbon? Um, yeah, just little details like that. I was just unclear on. There might be writing out there that I didn't find or read, so if there is, just reference me. But if not,
Cool. Yeah, just off the top, did you read the Git book as well, or just the blog?
no, I just read the blog post, man.
Okay, cool. We have a Git book too that's probably could explain a little bit more of what we're building. It's basically a lot of it is is similar stuff that you've seen at Olympus, but respun with what we're building here. But yeah, in short, basically the mechanics of this are built around an NFT index. So there's these carbon tons, they get tokenized in such a way that it's an ERC 721. Those 721s get deposited into an NFT index that spits out an ERC 20, and that ERC 20 is what's traded and bonded against Klima. So basically you have an indexed version of the carbon tons. And so you're gonna ask, why is this so complicated? Well, there's a lot of answers to this, but the primary answer is carbon tons themselves are not really exactly fungible. So one's coming from one project in a specific time and another project in a specific time, and different types of projects, they all carry a different value. And NFTs is the easiest way to capture that value. However, because of the sheer volume that you deal with, like it's not like CryptoPunks where there's like one or two that you can price at $35,000. Carbon tons, you're dealing with $500,000 to $1 million in a single lot. So it's important to, yes, have that uniqueness with the NFT, but it's also important to have it as a completely liquid asset. So that's why you deposit it into this NFTX style contract that basically spits out this ERC 20, and then you can have an average price out of it. So the price of Klima basically reflects this sum of indexes of what the actual average underlying asset is in there. Of course, it's the same principles as Olympus, where yes, each one is backed by at least one DAI, and there's a premium that gets associated with it based on like treasury premium and all that stuff. Klima is very much the same way. It's backed by at least 1 ton. In the first early stages, we're also discounting it as well with 2 tons because of what we know in the carbon markets today, that they're not exactly perfect, and they definitely carry a lot of not baggage, but they're just not as clean as we'd want them to be. No pun intended. And so then you know that your Klima is backed by at least 2 carbon tons. Now, what the actual price of carbon is, this totally varies on exactly the points earlier, which is where they come from, how they do. So that's why it's backed by the index. So the index basically will give you an average levelized price of what the carbon is, and then you have like an understanding of what that's worth. There's also like if you talk about like green theory and what people think about like social cost of carbon, like the actual projected price of it, what Sil was talking about earlier, like people also estimate that there's like a social cost to it as well that's like much closer to $200 a ton rather than what it's worth today, which is 15. So there's like an intrinsic value associated that way as well, but fundamentally it's based on that like levelized index.
Okay, that sounds very similar to what Judo had told me too. So my question also is so you guys have to, from the real world, you have to figure out like how much carbon there is. Like, is there some trusted source? Not how much carbon there is, but like there is some interface with the real world. Like, how are you guys dealing with that?
Yeah, I can take it one. So essentially, we, as Archimedes said, right, there's different type of projects, but there's also different types of standards. So in the voluntary market, there's like the 2 biggest standards are Verra and Gold Standard. There's some smaller ones like Climate Action Reserve, etc. But these are the 2 bigger ones. With Verra, I think having somewhat almost like 2/3 or 3/4 of the whole voluntary market. So they are the ones essentially setting the rules, telling a project what they need to do in order to get Verra carbon credits, essentially, right? And so they work with independent verifiers that will check out the project. I won't get into too much detail into that process, but at the end of the day, a carbon project is issued some carbon credits, and they're all registered on a public registry, which is maintained by Verra. It's centralized, so Verra has a registry, which is, you can Google it right now, you can see it. Gold Standard has a public registry and all of that. So what we'll be doing, essentially, we'll be leveraging infrastructure that is built by other teams that are allowing us to bring carbon on chain by retiring the carbon credits in the meat space. So essentially, kind of like burning them or freezing them, and then reissuing them as ERC 721s on chain. So with the importance that every ERC 721 is linked to its like meat space counterpart. So this assures that there's no double spending happen. Won't be possible to double spend the carbon credits by reissuing them on chain and now having something like that. Now these ERC 721s will be put into index pools, and we like in the medium term we definitely will have different indexes, right? We might see an index for nature-based carbon, like, or forestry carbon, or blue carbon, which is everything like mangrove protection and conservation, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, this is awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, and just like same thing, right? Like we're also, there's other teams working on providing end-to-end carbon, like Web3 based carbon tokens. And we are very much in conversations with them because we personally trust their mode of operation a lot more than we trust the traditional players, which is why we decided to discount the value by 50%, which is something that we don't need to do necessarily if we work with other players that can show us like, remote sensing, like satellite images, and that prove exactly what's been going on. And if the whole history of the carbon credit is like in a token and we can see that, we don't need to do that discount because we will trust that this one carbon credit actually has, removed 1 ton of carbon from the atmosphere, something that we can't really trust right now. So expect, I would say, in the medium term to see us, having multiple carbon assets in the treasury, which might have, different ratios. Like we might, discount, we might favor some over the others because we believe in the long-term value of them, while, we don't know the long-term value of like maybe a carbon credit of poorer quality.
Okay, that's great. And one last question, I'll take this in the audience, but
Sure, go ahead.
do you guys have any plans for would you guys ever think of like having like a futures market or something like that? I don't know how that would work with this, but is that anywhere in your plans?
Yeah.
Yes. So we've already been approached a couple times, but to actually develop futures markets on both Klima and the actual underlying carbon assets themselves, because they're very interesting for a number of reasons. Obviously, going long on civilization is something people want to do, and yeah, like futures are 100% something that people want to trade on. The problem is always the same. There's just zero liquidity. Like Bitcoin futures didn't become a thing until there was like an actual liquid market that you could trade on. BitMEX being, of course, the first one, but now there's FTX that's totally destroyed them, and there's a couple others that are now launching Binance futures. Like those all exist when there's liquid markets. So yes is the answer. It's just you have to build first, and then but once you're there, yeah, totally. Like futures make perfect sense for this, 100%. Ooh, good question. Do carbon credits expire? They do, and they don't.
I want to take it.
Yeah.
No,
yeah. I like. Yeah.
No, so they do expire in the sense that when you're a company and let's say you're polluting 100 tons a year, you're going to have to buy carbon credits, retire them to claim to be carbon neutral, whatever that claim is worth. But that's what a lot of companies do. So in a sense, these carbon credits have, you can't use the same carbon credits to claim that you're carbon neutral the next year, obviously. However, a carbon credit as of now, it doesn't really have, as long as it's traded and not retired, it doesn't really have a retirement date, which is something that we I personally believe, should see changing. Because especially with lots of like carbon removal based credits, there's always a question of durability, right? Like, so cool, you've planted a couple of trees. Like, how do you know these trees are going to be there like in 50 years? So I very much believe that in the like next years, we're going to see more solutions. And like, if we don't see them, like, let's build them as a community. More solutions that allow for like a little bit better understanding of the longevity of each carbon credit, right? And each ton that has been removed. Because, you know, soil carbon credits are super hyped right now, and you know, our soils have a huge capacity to store carbon, but the reality is that it's quite easy to re-release the carbon that is in the soil if you start to re-till the soil, for instance. So we need better mechanisms. The reality is that today these mechanisms are not in place in our markets. I hope that answered the question.
There's another question. You want to take this one, Axilos? It is, could there also be a way to account for methane emissions as well, similar to these carbon credits?
I'm not
they
sure.
already exist. Yeah,
so like methane capture, like, so carbon credits are essentially, if you go into Vera's website, for instance, and you check out the different methodologies that they have, you can think of the different methodologies like a recipe that you need to follow in order to be granted credits in the future. So it all starts by you saying, hey, look, I have this project here that I want to do. You start with the project design document, which gets approved. And there's a ton of there's a bunch of different methodologies out there. And methane capture, I'm sure there's like 10 different methodologies out there from methane capture. There's methodologies to give cows like specific nutritions, like supplements, or, you know, so that they produce less methane as well. So there's all, like, people come up with all sorts of crazy ways to claim a carbon credit. I hope that is the question that you were hoping to get an answer to. So maybe just to add on that, like, when we talk about carbon, what we actually talk about is CO2e. So it's CO2 equivalent. So every methane emission can be converted into a CO2 equivalent, right? So methane has something of like 25 times the power of the green global warming potential that carbon has. It's quite a powerful greenhouse gas. But every carbon emission will just be translated into CO2e, even if it's a methane emission. Maybe that's in addition to this question.
Yeah, that's good. Any other questions we want to answer before we wrap up? Because we're a bit over time anyway. We've been recording this one. I'll have to export the audio and get it into SoundCloud or something. But for anyone that missed it, we'll have an audio as well.
Oh yeah, I would say if no questions are remaining, let's call it a night, a day, a morning, wherever you are. And thanks so much for tuning in.
I think the next one we'll do is Wednesday, 2 days. We're trying to do these every 2 days until launch. I think maybe 2 or 3 days.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, awesome. Thanks everyone for coming. This is an awesome. If you keep asking awesome questions in the Discord, if you see anything in the docs that you don't understand, please ask. We want to make sure that we have totally transparent docs and totally understandable stuff, because we understand that a lot of this stuff is complicated. It's new. It's very much outside the realm of traditional DeFi stuff, and we really want to make sure that we nail it. Let's let us know. But otherwise, we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks everybody.